Hello and welcome to Raider HQ After Dark. I'm your host, Raider. And in this video, what I wanted to put out is kind of a 5 general reasons why the VA mess up your rating decisions and provide some context to it. Now, I have put out some of these in different videos. I've sprinkled in, why sometimes you can be looking at, okay, the 38 CFR Part 4 says this, the M21 says this. Why did you disagree with me? So we're going to kind of go through that and see what what and how the VBA itself, what are the motivations or what are the rationales behind why they can choose to not even follow their own policies and procedures. So let's go ahead and get into it. Now, I am going to share my screen. Oh, what is this? Gosh darn it. Okay, please like and subscribe. How did that get there? That always seems to show up. So that's what we're talking about today. 5 reasons why and how the VBA mess up your rating decisions. Okay, some of these can be malicious in nature. Some of them can be, just I'll get into it. Here we go. So, number 1. The first reason why oftentimes, the VA messes up your rating decision. And I need to say this up front is that not every single one of these will apply to you, right? This has to do with if you submit a really good claim and that really good claim should be given this result. Why is it not given this result? Not, I submitted a claim, didn't have any evidence, and the VA just denied me, maliciously. No, they denied you because you didn't have evidence. So the context of this video is about when the VBA chooses to do the wrong thing via accidentally or intentionally. Okay, so we're going to get into it. So the first one is operator error. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, because the VA claims process is like a huge game of telephone. A lot of times, if the VBA staff, if the VSC staff are not, having attention to detail, they can do the wrong thing at every single level. So, in terms of like the VSR in the development stage, they could not get your records that are critical to proving your case, that you have asked them to do, that it is their duty to do it. You can have it to where the VSR didn't add all your evidence to the examination request, hamstringing your ability, not putting all the evidence in front of the examiner. And as such, making it to where you have a much drastically lower probability of getting the accurate rating that you should get. In terms of the rater, sometimes the raters can actually, be going fast due to quality and production. Sometimes they're racing to chase their points, and they could accidentally miss some aspects of your DBQ when they transcribe the evidence, the check boxes and all that stuff from your DBQ onto VBMS. Sometimes that can happen. It can, and that's where I talk about top sheeting. Like sometimes they either, due to a speed error, or due to a skill issue, sometimes they do not do the proper process. Now, the final one here is being unfamiliar with the process. So when it comes to VSRs, raters, authorizers, you can't know everything. Typically what happens is they get into a rhythm of they're used to doing this, these certain tasks, let's say. And these certain tasks become very familiar to them. So they're really good at doing them. It requires less effort. They just know how to do it. They're familiar with that process. But let's say you claim something that is unique, or let's say that you are presenting something that falls outside of that normal, this is what I do on a daily basis thing. Anytime that a VSR, rater, or authorizer come across a situation where they're unfamiliar with a process, the chances that you do not get the outcome that you should have gotten go way up. So what's an example of that? Like National Guard and reservists, oftentimes, like for effective dates and whether or not they can be service connected, National Guard and reservists are unfamiliar. Also, if you're a member of the Merchant Marines, or if you're NOAA, or there's other, and I'll have to go into videos on that, but there are non-military components that can actually get uh, VBA cert. You can get disability, even though you were never in the actual military. You can get, if you served in these other ancillary kind of federal government agencies, you too can get um, disability, VA disability. It's really weird. I'll go into a video on it, but there's a lot of unfamiliar processes. When we make a big change, like when the PACT Act came out, that's another, like, when we have to like drink through a fire hose to learn a new process, a lot of errors can happen then. So operator error is, in my opinion, one of the biggest um, causes of getting an outcome that is refutable. And it's why a lot of you go to a higher level review, is because that's what the higher level review process is for. It's for instances where you can show, hey, look, this manual reference and this 38 CFR say these two things. However, this rater didn't do it the way that this says that they should have. And as such, I wasn't given my rating decision that I should have been. So anyway, that's the first one. So operator error, this is probably the more common one that you guys understand and that you fight on a daily basis, is just operator error. Somebody's going too fast. Somebody doesn't know what they're doing. It happens. Let's move on to number 2. So this one, number 2, is a little bit different than number 1, because number 1 has to do with being unfamiliar or not knowing something. It's typically a lack of competency in the job that causes them, either attention to detail or competency, that causes them to make that kind of error. It's kind of an operator error type situation. However, number 2 is more of a bias situation. Now, I've talked about bias in the channel of the staff a lot. And one of the biggest places that you see this is in the Terra memorandums currently. So what can happen is there's a battle currently being waged on how Terra memorandums are supposed to be interpreted. And you can have it to where decision makers and VSRs will actually fight with each other in a claim. One will put Terra toxic exposures onto the Terra memorandum. Another one will follow them right back up and take them off. And it happens so constantly. Now, why this can be bad is, let's say that, you get service connected for something, let's say hypertension due to a Terra exposure. You, in your mind as a veteran, you're like, okay, they've conceded me Terra. I've been granted for Terra. And then they come along and the next staff member says, oh, that's not true, and takes it away. So you file subsequent claims based upon the Terra that you were granted for legitimately, and you get denied for your subsequent claims because you do not have a Terra. I'm doing air quotes, have a Terra. So this is one of the things where the VA is not following its own rules, okay? Because if you've been granted for that Terra and there's no clear and unmistakable error, then the Terra should stay there. But there's this really weird gray area that allows VSRs and raters between each other to overturn the Terra memorandum that was decided beforehand. Now, I wholeheartedly disagree with this. And I mean, like, I'm going to probably do a Doug Collins video on this. I need Doug to weigh in here and tell people, look, this is what I would be happy with. The VSR can make the initial Terra memorandum determination, but the rater who is in control over, they're responsible for the entirety of the claim. They have to, if they change it, then a VSR has to get supervisor permission. They have to go through QRT and get supervisor permission to change the Terra memorandum if they want to take something away. If they want to add to the Terra memorandum, they should be able to do that. If they found additional Terra, that should be a thing. But this yo-yoing thing that happens is horrible. It's horrible. Like, you would not believe how many times I have looked at a claim and went, Why are there 7 Terra memorandums in here? It makes it to where it becomes confusing and convoluted. And that's never a place that you want your claim to be, is to be confusing, because that is error central. And whenever you have a situation where the decision makers, whenever they make changes to stuff, when that becomes convoluted, then the opportunities to have an unfavorable outcome when one should not be there, when you should be having a favorable outcome, the opportunities to get an unfavorable outcome drastically increase. So, this is another thing that, like, why am I doing this video? Well, it's so that way you guys can look at these things. You can be cognizant of them and you can say, okay, did my, I had everything, or I thought I had everything. Where's the disconnect here? So, Terra memorandums are one of the biggest things. And I suggest that every single veteran, if you can go to a VSO that has VBMS access, go to one and just see what's on it. See how many Terra memorandums you have, because that's when you can start telling when there's a fight happening. Like, I've had to go into my rating decisions and literally say on the Terra memorandum, this was completed by an RVSR. Please do not change this to take something away. This has been certified by the RVSR. Do not change it. QRT, if somebody changes this, I need you to track them down and error them into the ground. Like, just do the right thing, guys. But if you need to add to it, right? So the next thing is subjective decisions. Okay, so these are more like the rater's territory, where the Terra memorandums were the VSR and the rater. What I mean by subjective decisions are like individual unemployability, where the examiner doesn't make the determination as to whether or not you're service connected, it's the rater. And you have aid and attendance, which same criteria. The examiner will present evidence to the rater, but the rater, the non-medical rater, gets to make a medical decision somehow. Doesn't make any sense to me. But this is where the disagreements with the decision maker can happen. I have had just some anecdotal instances here. I've had instances where people have raised IU to issue, had the veteran fill out the IU, and the veteran's employed gainfully. Like, it goes back to operator error, but operator error can cause disagreements between decision makers. So this is kind of a compounding thing where I have to still deny you for something that, number one, you probably never claimed, or, like if I disagree with something. There are times whenever somebody will deny IU or deny aid and attendance, and I disagree with them, but I'm not afforded, unless there's a clear and unmistakable error, I'm not afforded the opportunity to overturn their particular bad decision just because I disagree with their application of their decision. There are like migraines at 50% is one of them too, where the examiner, will provide evidence, but the rater gets to make decisions. Anytime the rater gets to make a decision, it's so subjective that you can't generalize what the outcome's going to be. So IU, aid and attendance, migraines, just know that if you file one of those conditions, you have, like, what's the remedy? Should you get something where the rules say that you qualify for this, but the rater disagreed? What's your remedy? Well, obviously you can do a higher level review, potentially. Make sure that you weigh that determination as to whether or not you should do it versus all your other rating decisions. But you can do a higher level review. The next best thing, like if the higher level review doesn't overturn with a difference of opinion, then what you can do is you can actually go and get your evidence, get new and relevant evidence, do a supplemental claim, and actually put it before a different examiner. That's the best way, or a different rater. That's the best way to get a different outcome, is because in terms of like IU, aid and attendance, and migraines, it's all based upon, granted is in the eye of the beholder. It's all based on their personal opinion. There's no objective like tick marks in order to grant aid and attendance, IU, or migraines at 50%. I know some people will say, well, wait a minute, IU has a certain level of criteria and it requires, long form narrative type thing. And, Yeah, but you can just make up any reason why you don't want to grant somebody. I've had, heart to hearts with other raters about it where I'm like, dude, your perspective on this is, you're being very biased with this. So anyway, so those are subjective, like decisions that can be, the decision maker disagreements where you fall victim to that. It can go against the VA's own policy, but the decision makers have the right to make those determinations based upon air quote evidence and their interpretation of it under like 38 CFR 4.2 and 38 CFR 4.6. They can cite those two 38 CFRs, and if they cite them, then as long as they provided some rationale and quoted some evidence, they can make any decision that their little heart's content with, which can be independent of facts, independent of logic, independent of fairness to the veteran. But just keep that in mind. The last one here for disagreements where the VA won't follow its own rules is effective dates. Supplemental claims and the date the entitlement arose, there's a lot of different interpretations on that. When the date the entitlement arose. Some raters use the date that the DBQ happened, where that's the date the entitlement arose. And they will give you an effective date back to that date, which I don't agree with. It should go back to the date of claim or ITF of the supplemental claim if it cannot go further back. Like if it's locked into the claim, into the supplemental claim itself for the effective date, then you've got these two different camps. And the reason why you'll have disagreements with the decision makers on this, and where you as the veteran will read the CFR like 38 CFR 3.2501, and everyone in the room will have a different opinion on what it says. That's why I wish that the 38 CFRs and the manual were written more just plainly, to where it leaves no doubt, no gray area, and no wiggle room. But you'll have it to where the effective dates will be, depending on who you get, it'll be the date of the DBQ, or it will be the intent to file or the date of claim, which is what I go with for the claim itself. Because for me, that's the date the entitlement arose is within the new claim. I don't know if that one confused you guys, but just keep in mind that the effective dates for the decisions that you get, sometimes it's up to like two different decision makers can disagree on it. Like what counts under 38 CFR 3.400 for, like, let's say you do an increase and you have evidence within a year of the condition worsening. Well, technically, you should be able to go back to that date for the effective date of the change for an increase. Some raters view the evidence like they're not medical. So they might not view that evidence as being this is when the condition got worse. And it's hard sometimes for QRT to catch that. So you'll find a vulnerability there. What's the remedy for that kind of effective date where you do an increase and you have medical evidence showing it got worse within a year of your claim date? For the purposes of going back to that date, you got to make that thing just flashy, neon colors. Submit the evidence separately on the same day, but submit it separately. Upload the evidence specifically showing the date and the procedure, or the date and the medication and the date and the so-and-so that it was prescribed. You got to make it as noticeable as humanly possible, because operator error. We're going to go back to number one here and say operator error, where there's just sometimes where people don't catch things. All right, and that's about all I got for decision makers disagreements. There's a lot more to this. I'm just touching on it as an overall category. Now, number 3, this one you guys knew had to be coming, because I have got a problem with QRT. They have wronged me too many times. They've wronged people I know too many times. But the problem with why you get, why the VA doesn't follow their own rules stems from these human beings right here. And they've got 2 entries on this list of 5, so just know that I will be hammering them. But let's just talk about QRT training. So the thing you have to understand on this is that there are 2 different QRTs. There's QRT for the VSRs who are in development. There's and they also cover the last people of authorizers. So AQRS, that's what they're known as, they cover the VSRs and the authorizers. So like the both sides of the sandwich, they're the bread. And then you have RQRS that covers just the raters. Cool. Well, what can happen here is you can have it to where they're siloing even within QRT itself. So AQRS doesn't really talk to RQRS very often. So you can have it to where AQRS reads a rule differently than RQRS does, which is hilarious, by the way. So this is where I had put out a video a while ago talking about how within the video I talked about how prostate cancer, AQRS trains their people to order an exam anytime prostate cancer is diagnosed, air quote, by a civilian, by the VA, by so and so. Our QRS has a completely different set of rules for it that they should both be on the same page about. Because if your QRT that are doing the training are on the same page, then you get a better outcome all the way around. Like imagine whatever job you've got and you've got 2 different people telling you what to do and it's different. Like mom and dad need to be on the same page and they're not. And this is where a lot of the times you guys can have to where you do all your homework, you submit a great claim, you do all this stuff. And all it takes is one of these yahoos at QRT that have trained people the wrong way to do something. And you might go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't happen that often. Well, maybe not for that guy that works at that place where their QRT is great, but for the rest of the nation, it's a hot mess because what you should get is you should get objective deductive reasoning in how the 38 CFRs, how the M21 works, that is a general consensus between the group. And if there's any doubt, that general consensus, that little talking point that they're having right there about that thing where if they can't agree, then they should put that up to big VA and go, wait a minute, we're having a disagreement here. Can you guys please, weigh in on this? And that doesn't happen nearly enough. So what does happen is you get the siloing where they just pick their own lane, how they feel about something, and that's what you get, which means that you can go to the same QRT person with the same problem 10 times and potentially get 10 different answers on how to interpret the M21 or 38 CFR. And they train that way. So what'll happen is you'll get a training in October or something like that, and then you'll get quarterly trainings where they keep changing their minds about stuff, where you have to relearn something like 15 times during the year because they keep changing their perception on it. And that is maddening. And it's one of the reasons why whenever I first start training people, I tell them, look, stop listening to QRT, go directly into the M21. Now, for you veterans, what does this mean? Well, any kind of training issue, you still have the higher level review, okay, which will go to a DRO who is technically a QRT level person. But you still have the ability to do a higher level review, which means you get it in front of a different set of eyes and their interpretation. And you'll be talking with them. So you can say, hey, look, this is my interpretation of it, so and so and so and so. And you get to win over the person that's making the determination. Unlike in a training situation where somebody just gets to diarrhea their opinion onto a group of impressionable people who will take what they said as gospel and do things wrong. Now, one of the worst things with this portion, number 3, is that QRT, whenever they get it wrong, it takes months to correct the course of the ship, to get things going right again, because you've got to retrain everybody. And not just that, but every decision that was made during that time period that they were telling people to do the wrong thing, guess what doesn't happen? There's no accountability for that. They just go, oops, sorry, you know. Ugh. So, yeah, I've talked about a lot of these, but they train to a subjective standard based upon their personal interpretation of it that is independent of like consensus. So they don't go around going, do we have a disagreement here? Is everybody, this is how we do it? Okay. And that can happen in individual ROs, and you can have different ROs that have wildly different interpretations of manual references, which is maddening. It's the biggest game of telephone I've ever seen. So you can also, this one right here, delayed critical trainings, because QRT now does the trainings for like critical stuff. What'll happen is, and this has happened year after year after year, like when the PACT Act went in, we didn't actually receive our training to start knowing how to do PACT Act level things until like a week before the PACT Act came out. We didn't practice anything. We didn't plan up to it. And I've even had trainings after the change started, which is insane. TMS training and QRT training. But you'll have it that sometimes, this is not an all the time type thing, but sometimes the people that are doing your claim don't receive the training when they have to implement the change. I think the digestive, May 19th, 2024, when the digestive changes came in, that's probably the best example of it. We didn't receive the training until after we were doing it. It was insane. So this can be a thing too. So training at the VA is one of the reasons why your claim might not get the expected outcome. Now, obviously, whenever I say expected outcome, what I mean is nobody's in disagreement that this is service connected. Nobody is in disagreement with these are the facts. It's just that the VA, for whatever reason, due to lack of training, due to training the wrong way, errors in training, the person is just interpreting the laws and regulations wrong. And then we've got lacking skills to do the trainings. So this is the most maddening thing too, because the VBA has made QRT the trainers now, because if you're being paid at a GS-12 or GS-13, you should train other people, is the way that the VA works. And sometimes they do get these formal training classes by the VA, which are hosted by the VHA, like they're VHA trainings on how to lead and teach in the VHA. They are not specifically trainings for how to train or lead in the VBA, which I've had the training in the VHA, and it doesn't necessarily directly correlate to how you need to train in the VBA, because it's a lot of laws, rules, and regulations, where the VHA is typically procedure-based. You just do this, this, and this. It's hands-on. It's operant conditioning. But so you'll have oftentimes people giving trainings that have no business training. Like they legitimately have no business training at all, because they don't know how to train somebody. They don't know how to adjust to the audience. They don't know how to give alternative learning styles. So you'll have where they don't even double check to make sure that everybody's on the same page. They don't train to the lowest common denominator. They don't, it's horrible. Training is the worst one. Well, second worst one on this list. But let's move on, because we're already at 28 minutes. Number 4, I just mentioned this one, internal SOPs, standard operating procedures. This is one of the bigger things as to why the VA does not follow their own rules. Now, what I mean by that in this context is there's a set of rules that the veteran can see, and then there's these internal SOPs that you cannot see. So you are planning your claim based upon the forward-facing, like this 38 CFR and this M21 manual reference. This says this. I'm good to go. I'm going to get, now I'm going to be 60% based upon this. However, internal SOPs can pull the rug out from under you. And I don't understand why we have these and why they're not public facing. So the first thing with these internal SOPs is they're not open to the public. Number 2, they're constantly changing. There's different versions of them. I can't even remember what the PACT Act SOP is on. I think we're above 6 now. The internal SOPs are subjective to interpretation. So you can have it, falling back into this problem is local QRT will train based upon the SOP that's put out by national, or you could have local level SOPs, which are the hottest mess on the planet. But they're subjective to interpretation. So you'll have entire swaths of claims being done incorrectly based upon somebody's feelings or their beliefs about what they read. Or it could come down to even reading comprehension. I'm not going to joke about that. QRT sometimes, I think they need a reading comprehension test because I have spent sometimes, I don't get many quality errors, but whenever I do, I will read the manual and I will read it slowly to them. This is what it says. So and so and so and so. What did I do? So and so and so and so. These these are the same picture. You know that meme where it says, can you tell corporate wants you to tell the difference between these two pictures? Nope, they're the same picture. Now, this also falls back to results may vary depending on the regional office because each regional office has its own QRT, which has all these people that believe that they know better than the manual. They believe that they feel like they know something. And I'll say another side note on QRT. Somebody asked me one time, they said, "Hey, why didn't you become QRT?" Because I don't deal well with bullying. And I will say that there's a significant amount of bullying that happens within the QRT demographic. And all you people that want to come out and go, "That's not true," foxtrot yourself with a hammer. Okay. I mean that because I will not accept that as a response that you're not being genuine. It's disingenuous to say otherwise because I have known good raters that have transitioned over to QRT and they literally get bullied into accepting the pack mentality of this is how we interpret it. Right, wrong, or indifferent. This is how we interpret it. This is it. And they're like, but this is what the manual says. We shouldn't give this person a quality error because the manual actually says what they did. No, that's not the way it looks. I mean, it's gaslighting and bullying combined. I have seen it. I have seen people that are actually physically upset. They hate their job because they get bullied so much in QRT. That's why I like being a rater, is because I get left alone for the most part. I like autonomy. But no, QRT, the results vary, and those results are absolute because QRT is built upon the emperor's new clothes, that they know what they're doing and you have to trust them just absolutely. And the moment that perception dies away, when you stop trusting them implicitly, then you start questioning them. And then the hierarchy falls apart. So that's why they get, people that go against the grain get bullied. And not because they're wrong, but because everyone has to give this perception is reality nonsense that even when they make bad decisions, okay, they're right. They have to be right. And that's what's going to lead us into number 5. QRT quality errors. This is one of the most egregious instances as to why the VA will not follow their own rules sometimes. Sometimes quality errors can benefit the veteran. I will say that up front. That is a truth. Sometimes due to number one with operational errors, the quality error catches it and they save the day. Cool. But more often than not, in my personal opinion, I have been asked or I've been witness to or I've helped other raters fight against somebody interpreting, having a reading comprehension stroke where they can't figure out how words go together and they will read something wrong, as evidenced by my fatty liver example where I got the error for not doing a secondary medical opinion for fatty liver, even though the thing can never be granted. There's no way on earth and under heaven. But why did they keep pushing? Because that would have been cool for the veteran to get granted for something. I mean, it would have been severed 10 minutes later, by anybody that looked at it. But why do they why do quality errors go against the grain so much? Well, because it's insanely subjective to the personal bias of the person calling the error based on fear. Because the way the QRT works is they have to call errors. If they call a frivolous error or they call any error, they're safe. If they say that a claim is perfect and somebody else goes behind them and says, oh no, this was an error, then the quality person can get an error themselves. So they're trained, classically conditioned, to actually go and find any frivolous thing that they can disagree with, even based upon personal bias. Now ask yourself, how the hell does that help the veteran if they're just calling frivolous errors out of fear? Well, it doesn't. I mean, sometimes it does. Like, if they're looking for legitimate errors, then fine. But if they can't find a legitimate error, they will make one up more often than not. They will just top sheet and just do that. And also, the results may vary depending on the regional office because historically, the regional offices would do their own quality reviews way back in the day. And what happened is that you had a lot of playing favorites. So a lot of people, like, oh, my cousin over here, he's not going to get an error. That stuff still happens, by the way. It's kind of disgusting. But when they switched it over to where now your RO should not be doing your own quality reviews, they still do, and it's still sketchy. But the other ROs are supposed to be doing the quality reviews. So here's the problem. When you compound all of these things together, so you've got operator errors, you've got the difference of opinion in decision makers, you've got QRT that's locally siloing trainings, you've got internal SOPs that are constantly reviewed differently and open to interpretation. Your claim gets sent to a different RO that has a different set of norms and a different set of belief system about how the manual works. Then you get frivolous errors called on you by these other ROs that don't believe the same thing that you believe. This is the madness, people. This is the madness with the quality and production system. And this is how your claim can constantly be vulnerable to falling through the cracks and being vulnerable to different aspects of, subjective bias. Now, hold on just a second. And through the power of editing, I am back. And I'm going to tell you, like, we've had this conversation in the comments section, and it was about the 10-year rule. And I want to give you an example of how QRT forced me to sever a veteran's claim that had been, in process, or it had been rated for 14 years. So what we're going to be talking about is the 10-year rule. And I want to show you how QRT can be the problem. So let me just go here. So I got called an error on me because I didn't sever a 14-year-old claimed condition that had been service connected for 14 years because there was a duty to assist error that had originally happened where the veteran was erroneously granted for Agent Orange exposure in a location that wasn't conceded at that time. So I was forced to sever it. Now, I didn't sever it. I left it alone because I was like the 10-year rule. Because if you look at 38 USC 3.957, it plainly says that service connection for any disability or death granted or continued under 38 USC, which has been in effect for 10 or more years, will not be severed except upon showing the original grant was based upon fraud, or it is clearly shown in the medical records the person concerned did not have the requisite service or character of discharge. Well, they did actually have the requisite of service because it was Thailand. It was just based upon the interpretation of the individual. So it was a duty to assist error. So the veteran was on the flight line for Agent Orange in Thailand, and that's something that we were told that we could concede. But the QRT disagreed. So the part that they disagreed on, because I thought that they had the requisite of service. They did. They had the requisite of service. And it, um, anyway, the 10-year period will be computed from the effective date of the Department of Veterans Affairs finding of service connection to the effective date of the rating decision severing service connection. So basically, when were you granted and when are you planning on, severing it? And then that's the rate, that's the span of time that you're supposed to use to calculate the 10-year rule. However, QRT called the error and they said, well, wait a minute. You didn't follow this portion of the CFR because it says after compliance with 38 USC 3.105D. And it says the protection afforded in this section extends to claims for dependency and indemnity, so death of the veteran. So they said, okay, so we went to 3.105D, which talks about the severance of service connection. So QRT's personal bias on this was you have to first apply the rules and regulations of 3.105D. And if it passes 3.105D, then you may calculate the 10-year rule. And I was like, okay, I mean, I can kind of see where you're coming from with that, but I don't agree with it because the veteran met criteria. I mean, that's a difference of opinion. It shouldn't count. So then they read me this, and it says subject to the limitations of 3.957. And I was like, well, right there, it says the limitations. And they're like, yes, but the 3.957 say that you have to use this first. So it says service connection will be severed only where the evidence establishes that it was clearly and unmistakably erroneous. Now, that's where, I was like, what the follow law are you talking about? Is because I'm like, it's not clear and unmistakable that the veteran served in Thailand. They served on the flight line. I've got them close to the perimeter. That should have counted. Well, they're like, well, it's clear and unmistakable to me that they should never have been granted. And I don't know, paper, rock, scissors. It's paper, rock, scissors, QRT. QRT always wins, by the way. So QRT, they used this portion of it and said, well, wait a minute. You're going to sever that person. And there was nothing I could do. I fought them tooth and nail. I went to the first recon. They said, no, we're going to go with our buddy on this one. We agree with the QR error upheld. So I went to the second one. I quoted it on this one. And they said error upheld. Then I went to the third one. And the third one's where your RO's QRT, their RO's QRT kind of get into it and you kind of talk it out, which means that you get to say words and they get to feel how they want to. There's a power differential here where they will almost always win unless your QRT goes behind the scenes and gets your back. Like this is the weirdest good old boy buddy system I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's not based upon fact. It's based upon feelings. QRT should just be removed. I would rather have AI do my QRT and say, good luck everyone with it, because this right here, they forced me to sever this veteran. And it's not right because even by today's standards, he met criteria. And the veteran had to reapply for benefits after the PACT Act went through. And I was like, what the follow law is going on? But no. Yeah, I'm sorry, Luna. Yeah, I know. I didn't mean to get so upset. But this is one of the things. So in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about where they didn't follow their own rule. Their rule is that it shouldn't be it shouldn't be severed. It can't be severed. But QRT can force you to do that. So it's sometimes like, I know you guys get mad at the Raiders a lot, and the Raiders have a lion's share of the responsibility of this. But sometimes, guys, I want you to, and I need you to understand, it is not just the Raiders that do this. Sometimes Raiders are forced to do bad things that go against their own rules and regulations when QRT deems it so in an inequality error. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about the 10-year rule thing, and I wanted to talk about how what are some of the things that you can do, like if this happens to you? Well, do a higher level review, get it in front of a different set of DRO eyes, because they won't be able to see the quality error that was given on the claim. So they will look at their interpretation purely of the last rating decision. They'll just look at it. They won't get to see all the back and forth between the quality error and unless they really dig deep into it, but they typically don't. So that's what my suggestion is to remedy that. If you have something like this where the 10-year rule gets applied wonky, then you need to do a higher level review. Now, let's say the higher level review doesn't go through. I was talking, like, Jim might be able to answer this one a little bit better, but I would go to the Board of Veterans Appeals, because they have a much better interpretation of because we're in the CFR currently. And that's why when QRT gets into the CFR and they're using the CFR over the M21, you get a lot more mistakes too, because they get to these are written in such a way where, they get to interpret it how they want to, and their perception is the VSC's reality, unfortunately. But we're at 45 minutes and 41 seconds. So I'd like to thank you all for hanging in there with me. This was all in one take, so woohoo! But if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I'd like to take the time to thank all the members who, you put forth your time, your hard-earned money. I will talk to you guys later. Raider out.